As a follow-up to my video on outdated catalysts, I wanted to go back around after a recent comment on that same video that essentially brought up the fact that there is some things in Destiny that are still entirely missing catalysts. So I wanted to take a moment to go through it and basically just say why some things don't have catalysts, but at the same time, what doesn't have it, to give you an idea. So when we go through, of course, catalysts, like I mentioned in the previous video, came out during Season 3, and just to put it in perspective, everything before Cerberus, like these 9 kinetics, these, let's just say, 12 energy weapons, and these 7, maybe 8, maybe 9, I forget how many, but all of those weapons were the only weapons available when catalysts come out. So it makes sense that not all of them have catalysts. I'm pretty sure, actually thinking about it, maybe Worldline, maybe Whisper, maybe Acrius, maybe Coldheart. Actually, no, I know Sunshot did, and Graviton Lance, as well as Sweet Business, just because of faction rallies. But yeah, it's hard to keep track of exactly when everything came out. But of those weapons, I'd say only about half of them actually got a catalyst on launch. And then going forward here and there, of course, weapons came out. Some got catalysts down the line, and others kind of fell along the wayside. So when Forsaken launched, practically nothing on the list ever had catalyst. As you know, Malfeasance just recently got one, Ace of Spades got one, I think, Season of Splicer-ish time. Izanagi's Burden didn't get one until 2 seasons later, and a variety. Same thing with Arbalist. It didn't get Genesis until, I think, Witch Queen, which in the end was kind of not exactly needed. It's a nice little cherry on top, but regardless, I digress. When you go through the full list of things, it wasn't until Season of the Undying that things regularly actually had catalysts on launch. Of course, as you know, with the seasonal structure, even though it's getting reworked, when a seasonal exotic came out, you got it either initially at season launch, or you also got it during progression. And you would also get a seasonal catalyst quest that you could complete to earn the catalyst after a while. It takes a lot of grinding, but almost all of them are available practically at launch. And almost every single, or not almost, actually, every single season has an exotic that immediately launches and also has a catalyst. But then there are some outliers, because there are things that had quests that had catalysts to them that dropped. Now, I forget which one I'm in. Yes, when Bad Juju came out, it had its catalyst right off the bat, and it actually had access to the one Bad Juju catalyst, which isn't exactly powerful, but it was right there at launch. And then you look at things that, when they came out, like Devil's Ruin, was also a seasonal quest exotic. It doesn't have a catalyst, period. So, going into the full length as well, there is a weird thing between reprised raids and normal raids that is essentially a habit. Aside from Legend of Acrius, no other regular raid, and I say regular raid as in a new to Destiny 2 raid, has any catalysts. Only reprised raids actually have exotic catalysts. Vex Mythoclast, Touch of Malice, as well as Necrochasm. Which kind of makes sense. The gun already exists. It's not hard to think of a catalyst, really. But at the same time, only reprised raids have gotten a catalyst. Curious. But then at the same time, since Duality, every new weapon that came out of, or exotic weapon that came out of a dungeon also has a catalyst. As Heart Shadow came out with a catalyst, Arcane Meats came out with a catalyst, and at this point, what's the word? Navigator had a catalyst right off the bat, to be found later, hopefully, at the Season 23 catalyst quest in the dungeon. But now, just going through each category, I'm going to run through pretty much everything that no longer, at least doesn't have a catalyst, period, in the game. Because I know a bunch of people are probably going to go and comment this, and this is for the future. If I say something that has a API catalyst that says it does have a catalyst, we just don't know what it is, that they don't have a catalyst. We don't have access to it. It's not in the game files. They're not working on it just yet. But from the kinetic slot, the Chaperone currently does not have a catalyst, as does Wishender, the Last Word, Bastion, and Final Warning. Now, of that list, some of these are quite old. Now, aside from Wishender and Chaperone, actually think of everything, all of these were quest exotics in some way or another. They weren't random drops, they didn't have a source, they were quest exotics. Now, some of them I can understand being a difficult topic for getting a catalyst. I can't imagine Wishender actually getting a catalyst. If, honestly, it got a catalyst that just made it anti-barrier, that is probably the thing that makes sense right nowadays. And Chaperone, possibly easy to say, just because if it just gives it its revised version of Destiny 1, where when Road Border is active and getting 3 precision kills returns 2 rounds of the mag or something like that, triple tap essentially, I would see that working. The problem is, at the same time, they are quite old at this point. I'm not sure any of these will actually get an exotic unless they're warranted. Like I said, people were clamoring for a Thorn Catalyst, which that is coming out soon, so that is why I did not bring it up, essentially, because we know that is in the works. But things like Last Word, it's possible to see that this never gets a Catalyst. I know people have been suggesting that Hip Fire be the rapid fire aimed on sight to a slow fire that essentially mimics First Curse, but then this would be the end-all be-all to a close range and long range hand cannon, and that would be too overpowered. But I digress. Moving on to the energy slot, there's actually a lot more in that column that is missing things entirely. Now, starting off, Wave Splitter, which is an interesting one considering everything else. Then you also have Taraba, Divinity, Devil's Ruin, all three of the Class Glaives, and Collective Obligation. Practically everything else in here was either literally seasonal or an exotic that had a mixed match in the case of Excalibur. Quite literally, after Collective Obligation, seasonal, dungeon, so it came with a catalyst. Exotic quest that had a thing, then seasonal. You get my meaning here. But that's essentially everything in the energy slot that also doesn't have a catalyst. It makes sense for the Class Glaives in a weird way, as much as I wish they did have a catalyst, because it's kind of hard to give a crafted gun a catalyst, especially when it's something so variety, unless it was literally just improving the effects of all three. I can see why they don't have catalysts. But then going back to Wave Splitter, that's a weird one, considering it's another one that they keep seeming to buff the gun, as opposed to giving it a catalyst that buffs the gun. Same thing with a variety of other things, but at the same time, Devil's Ruin, that doesn't have a catalyst, which it is a very odd state because it's already anti-champion. It's pretty nifty. I think it's a Crucible cheese in a weird way. I've wanted to get back into using the sidearm, but like I said, it doesn't have a catalyst that could spice it up. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a Bungie dev. They could have a line in the works to give this thing incandescent or some form of weird radiant perk when it comes out. There could be in the works. I don't know. I'm just giving my view as the YouTuber who is very small and doesn't have access to any of the dev dialogues. But then going into the heavy slot, there's actually a lot more here. So, right off the bat, 1,000 Voices, no catalyst. Queenbreaker, Anarchy, Truth, Xenophage, Salvation's Grip, Eyes of Tomorrow, The Lament, Parasite, Deterministic Chaos, Winterbite. All of those don't have catalysts. Now, going back to what I said before, raid exotics don't get new ones. Aside from Acreus, which got possibly one catalyst came out, 1,000 Voices, no catalyst. Anarchy, no catalyst. Almost everything that came out to a raid in this day and age that wasn't the first one, which, like I said, Acreus, every time they've come out, no catalyst. Which, to an extent, I kind of understand. Only a little bit. Just because these things are so powerful generally, that at the same time, a catalyst on these raid exotics might be too nutty, because usually a new raid exotic is something that is completely unique. Perfect case being Collective Obligation, which I realized I missed from my kinetic slot. Wrong words. Conditional Finality is extremely powerful. I understand why it doesn't have a catalyst. Honestly, the only thing I can think of the catalyst being is making it so instead of firing 2 trigger pulls, you can do like initial pull gives you the fire shot, or the free shot, excuse me, and the release of that trigger gives you the station shot. So you can do a quick 1-2 as opposed to just the 1 and then 2. But like I said, that is the only thing I can think of that doesn't make this thing nuts. Something like Snapshot, maybe Elemental Capacitor. It's hard to say, because that seems to be the go-to when it comes to making catalysts nowadays, is just adding Elemental Capacitor. But I digress. To the point where everything comes out, it seems weird, because, like I said, seasonal exotics always have a catalyst. Dungeon exotics always have a catalyst. Reprise raids always have a catalyst. But then when you go to look at the things that came out with a year-end rotation, there's no catalyst to be found. Parasite came out with Witch Queen. Nothing. Class Sword, or Class Glaives. Nada. Now, keep in mind, Striga got a catalyst, but that is an odd point because I'm pretty sure this was something that was going to get a catalyst from the start or something like that, or it was always going to be so powerful. It's hard to say. This one's really an outlier. Because then going into, let's just say, what's the word I'm thinking of? Beyond Light. When Beyond Light came out, Hawkmoon was the pair season, so that made sense that that had a catalyst. But then when you actually look at everything, Cloud Strike, that didn't have a catalyst until fairly recently. Lament, still nothing. Then you go to things like, I forget what else came out in that season. Let's see. Lament. I'm trying to remember. Let's see. Duality was seasonal. I lost my train. Oh, right. Salvation's Grip. That also doesn't have a catalyst, which that one could be an easy one. It doesn't need much. As it got reworked, it's pretty nifty. Now, if you make it so that every shattered crystal gives you stasis shards or something like that, maybe even a little bit of a slow on detonation. It's hard to say. It's real easy to think of on the fly, but like I said, it's weird that some things still in this day and age don't have catalyst, considering that Bungie is on an oddly consistent catalyst release. Like I say again, dungeons always have new ones, reprised raids always have new ones, the seasonal exotic always has a new catalyst, and like I said before, with a lot of things that I've gone back to and retouched, seasonally, they do seem to be releasing a consistent old weapon catalyst. We just got Monte Carlo, Thorn is going to be up and coming, and past the various seasons, things have gotten a catalyst. Malfeasance, I think, was the season just before that. They are kind of going back and doing them, but it's weird thinking that every season we have a one revamp, one seasonal, and depending on the kind of content released, we also have the one new dungeon / raid thing. Because the whole rotation is the new DLC of the year, that has a raid. And then midway through the year, we have a reprised raid, which that's going to be running out because we only have one more raid to reprise, aside from vaulted ones. But like I said, it's just weird looking at the Catalyst schedule and seeing that they're only digressing and going back to old ones once a season. Meanwhile, they're also pumping out 2 to 3 other Catalysts a season, when some things could get some easy love. Like I said, Chaperone could easily just get that last perk that gave it more ammo. It would be helpful in PvE, and definitely in case we just need a solid slug. PvP might be a little bit broken, but it literally would be just restoring it to its former glory. But I digress. With that, my name is Matt Scorpion, and I will see you in the next video.